Welcome to the Fitness Business Podcast, brought to you by Active Management, the world's leading fitness business coaches who in 2015 will help you #grow your business. This is the world's #1 podcast for fitness business owners and managers. We interview real owners and learn what has been working for them to make them so successful. Here's the host of the Fitness Business Podcast, Chantal.
Thanks, Harper. A very warm welcome to you all. I hope you're having a fantastic week. I've had the most sensational week because I went trapezing this week. I know it's not your everyday workout, but it's something that I've wanted to do for ages, and it was awesome. And it was great exercise. Now, naturally, I filmed my best trick to show you all. So, if you want to check out my circus skills, I'll post the link on our Twitter handle, which I assume you're following anyway, but just in case, it's @FitBizPodcast. Now, speaking of Twitter, my guest for today has, one or two Twitter followers himself. To be fair, the last time I checked, he had a touch over 344,000 of them. Yep, you heard me right. Our guest for today is Bryan O'Rourke. Bryan is the president of the Fitness Industry Technology Council. He's an entrepreneur, an investor, a former club owner, and he's worked in health club and fitness industry with his partners for 18 years. Now, if you want to keep ahead of the game on top of the coolest fitness gizmos, gadgets, and technology, then you need to be following Bryan O'Rourke on Twitter. In fact, he was recognized as one of the top 17 most influential entrepreneurs on Twitter. So it's probably a good time that I tell you his Twitter handle is @BryanK.O'Rourke. I'm guessing by this stage you probably know that this week's show is all about fitness technology. But more specifically, Bryan tells us the coolest things happening right now. He gives us tips on staying up to date with all of the new stuff that's coming into the market. Plus, best of all, he lists his top 3 products that are non-negotiables for fitness professionals. All of that is on its way in less than 60 seconds time. But before we jump into today's show, I also have another special guest for today. Now, I often get great feedback from you guys, but I don't really have a chance to chat to you one-on-one about it. And it goes without saying that we gain some of our best knowledge and experience from others within the industry. So I figured, why not hand the microphone over to you guys and hear what you are loving about the show, what you found really valuable, and what you want to hear more of. So stay tuned because my chat with one of our listeners is coming up very, very soon. But for now, enjoy my chat with Bryan O'Rourke. Okay, I am so excited to be speaking to you today, Bryan. Thank you so much for joining us. I thought we might start off by you telling us a little bit about where you are right at this very moment.
Well, good morning to you, Chantel. I am in Dallas, Texas at the Gold's Gym 50th Anniversary Convention, which is really quite a thing. You know, the Gold's Gym brand started in 1965, which is amazing. And I was telling the crowd today that my family is from New Orleans, and an interesting piece of trivia was that Joe Gold actually started his first gym in New Orleans in 1953 called Ajax Gym. And I was surprised to know not many people realize that. What a great, iconic brand, arguably the largest global chain by way of membership in the world, or at least in the very, very top. And a group of wonderful people, a great brand, and a great celebration to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I'm really excited, as I was saying to you before, to be talking to you because I've been following you on Twitter for a long time now, along with, last time I checked, about 338,000 other people. Does that sound about right as far as your Twitter followers go?
You're going to make me blush. Yeah. Too bad this is television.
One or two Twitter followers. So I am one of those. I follow you as well. Thank you. It's a great privilege to have you on the show today, Bryan. Now, I have a confession to make. And that is that only just last weekend I purchased my very first Fitbit, and I've had it for about 3 days now, and I'm already completely addicted to it. Now, you're a world leader in fitness technology, so I was hoping that you might tell us about what the coolest things are that are actually happening out there at the moment.
Oh, there's so many cool things, Chantel. I mean, the list is very, very long. Everything from, what's going on and has been evolving in Mobility 3.0, where whole business models are now being launched, like Fit Reserve or Class Pass or Class Hopper, where their whole platforms kind of akin to Uber being adopted for classes and commerce. There's Les Mills Immersive, which is now in Pure Gym in Hong Kong, CMG Sports in Paris, and a 24-hour in California, and that whole interesting kind of new age integration. There's what SoulCycle's doing in their app, which is phenomenal in its robust ability with fantastic user experience to do everything from purchasing and procuring high-end apparel to following the playlist of your favorite instructors. There's the Internet of Everything, the industrial internet. Think of club operators not having to worry about their cardiovascular equipment going down and having their devices all hooked up to service providers, monitoring data 24/7 to help manage assets. And then there are a couple of other little quirky things. I don't know, have you heard of Happy Fork? Happy Fork is a vibrating fork that measures how quickly you're eating. And if you get out of rhythm, it quantifies your eating patterns and helps coach people to make sure that they're staying at the right pace of consuming their lunch or dinner or breakfast. And then there's Sensoria Smart Socks, which are wearable washable socks that track activity via your ankles and project that data into your apps and smartphones. So I could go on and on
Whoa.
on the level of different kind of products and cool things. It's really an amazing time. I call it the new era of fitness.
That is amazing. Would you mind elaborating a little bit more? The first thing that you mentioned, you talked about Fit Reserve and Class Pass and stuff like that. And we do have a lot of club owners and club managers that listen to the show. Can you elaborate a little bit more on those particular products?
Yes. So, the products basically are a proposition where if clubs or studios wish to be members of their network, they can sell their capacity, empty seats. And the app provides the ability to purchase for a fixed rate per month, unlimited attendance at studios. Now, studios typically with most of these platforms, they'll cap the number of classes you can actually physically take at a specific location, perhaps at 2 or 3 in the month. So it's a great combination of both trial for studios and as a new resource for redistribution of empty spots to people who want to have a convenient alternative. Because if you're traveling around quite a bit, you can't stick to one club, or perhaps you want a variety. You want a Pilates, you want a cycling studio, you want, a combination of experiences. This kind of divides it up in a way that's easily consumable for the consumer and enables the club or studio to resell spots that they may not have people in otherwise. Interestingly, as you probably know, Payal Kadakia, who's the founder of ClassPass, they've attracted $50 million in venture capital to that company, which is amazing. I think that it'll be very interesting to see what ultimately develops in that type of platform. But if anything, it represents these kind of new disruptive models that are appearing in the marketplace. And it means that we're at a tremendous time of innovation. Some implications, it's new scary territory for some operators, understandably, but it certainly represents the fact that things are changing and this technology is really facilitating that change.
Bryan, you've already mentioned a number of different types of technology. And as fitness professionals out there, it isn't easy to keep up with what's happening and what's going on. What sort of advice would you give to fitness people to actually stay up to date with everything that's happening, all of the technology, all of the trends? And then I guess part 2 of that is, how do you then evaluate which areas you should explore?
That's a great question. And Chantal, you're one of the professionals that does what I do. And that is, I follow people on Twitter. If you go to my Twitter handle at Bryank O'Rourke, you're going to find that I have a lot of lists where I organize content feeds by, new thinkers, global fitness instructors, professionals, people like my associates, Lindsay Rainwater, Lindsay H2O, Robert J. Dyer, the Fitness Industry Technology Council, of course, Active Management, URSA, everyone from Chuck Runyon, the founder with Dave Mortensen of Anytime Fitness, to Gary Vaynerchuk on marketing and kind of new business models, Europe Active, Fitness Australia, all these major associations and influencers are out there in the space sharing content and interacting with anybody. So the one thing, and Twitter may not be your cup of tea, there are other sources that are similar, but I find Twitter to be fantastic. And if you can organize lists and set aside some time each week to identify those things that are most relevant to you, the brands, technology brands, the leaders, they're out there sharing information openly, and many of them will interact with you. Sarah Robb O'Hagan, who's the head now of Equinox, she routinely interacts with me. I've never met Sarah yet directly, or even Payal Kadakia from ClassPass. She attended my URSA lecture because we had Twitter exchanges. So for anyone in the world that is interested in following trends, I think that is a fantastic platform. As to your other question, that's a little more complicated. How do you evaluate what is relevant and what isn't? And I think for many of our clients, Chantel, before we talk about technology, we try to assess basics. What is your strategic plan? Whether you're a fitness professional, an owner of a studio, or a CEO of a 500-unit chain of health clubs, you have to start with the basics. You have to ask yourself questions. How are you going to compete? Where are you today? What can you be best in the world at? What do you care about? And what is going to drive your economic engine, as Collins said in his perennial book, Good to Great? I think that, as well, which is a very hard thing for people to do, you need some objective advice. For some participants in the fitness space, perhaps they've had a health club operation that's been in place for 25 years. And the answer for them before they explore a lot of alternatives might be, do you need to exit your business right now or not? So, there are many personal dynamics, values, the DNA of your organization and culture that can kind of dictate, where you are, where you're capable of going. And then what is your competition in your market and what's happening? So I think answering those questions is kind of a first step to have a real strategy so that then you can appropriately identify how you're trying to create value for your consumer. And that comes down to user experience, to creating value, to customer journey mapping, and using technology as an accelerator to do things. Because it's not all about the technology. It's about, of course, the balance of the greatest app there is, human beings, integrated with that kind of digital physical experience that you have to provide to be really effective in today's market. And different concepts will do that in different ways. I hope that wasn't too long-winded of an answer.
No, it's funny, Bryan, because as you were talking, and you don't know this, but last week I caught up with JT from Active Management and we spoke about betterment. And one of the things that we discussed in that particular consumer trend was the need of this combining technology with human sort of interaction in order to decipher a lot of that technology. And it sounds like this is a very similar sort of advice that you're giving in regards to the importance of having that human element in the planning and in the goal setting and the identifying what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then combining it with the technology that's coming into the market.
No, that's right. And I would suggest some real business resources. I mean, one great one is a book. It's a handbook called Business Model Generation by Alexander Osterwald. And it's a handbook to help organizations contemplate designing their future enterprise models. And there are literally dozens of different examples across industries of different approaches to the consumer. And it provides some objective analysis for anyone. Another person I really enjoy is Rita McGrath out of Columbia University. You can follow her on Twitter. And she has written books like Discovery-Driven Growth and other things, talking about how to practically weigh the question of evaluating where you want to go and what your options are. So those are some things your listeners may be interested in exploring.
Absolutely. And I should take this opportunity to remind our listeners that all of the references that Bryan's making and books and the people that you're referring to, we will make sure that there is links in the show notes for today. Now, let's talk specifically about tech products. I want to know about apps or devices. Really, I'm looking for the non-negotiables for health clubs, Bryan.
Well, all business models are different. There are going to be some gyms out there that don't need any technology, and they might do just fine, again, in reference to what we just spoke about before. But I would say that there's no doubt that mobility is critical. If you are not providing a mobile experience, and not just any mobile experience. I'm not talking about just an extension of a common website, but some type of mobile experience that has the ability to engage and provide functionality to members or prospective members. I think that is critical. I think that is very, very important. There are a number of great providers, NetPulse, I know of them, but there are others that provide very good platforms. And you have to consider as well your internal billing systems and other factors. But I don't think it is very negotiable to not have a mobile strategy and some mobile app presence that is very well thought out for many reasons. The second thing I would say is not to tout any specific wearable training solution. There are many good ones. There's some that are whole platforms. And of course, platforms like MyZone and others. Recently, Europe Active published a book called Essentials of Motivation and Behavior Change with Jan Middelkamp, and I contributed a chapter on technology on this point. And the bottom line being, for trainers, for group exercise people, for others, there needs to be some education and integration of programming around the use of these most popular apps, because they can have a direct bearing on the member experience and really help guide the member through tracking in a very functional and impactful way. So I think, clubs, no matter what the top apps or wearables they might use together, they need to have a clear, thought-out strategy of being familiar with those key and popular ones that their members are using and that are reliable, and have some integration with programming, be it as I mentioned, a holistic solution like MyZone or others that is available. And then the final thing that we already touched on, so sorry to reiterate, Chantel, is, you really need a business strategy and a mapping of your customer journey so that with any of these kind of technology applications, you're thinking through how you want it to work for the member. And that isn't as easy as people think. So that third one is really the first one, because, having that seamless experience that encompasses everybody from the front desk through how they deal with your brand or studio or health club through an app has to be designed to meet needs in a very simple, easy to use way that makes people happy, gets them what they want the way they want it. And so, that's kind of bread and butter, but it's so fundamentally true.
Bryan, in the first of those three areas, you talked about mobility, and earlier in our chat, you spoke about SoulCycle. Can you talk through their model as an example of a mobility solution?
I think SoulCycle is a great example of one of the top brands at doing this right now. If you go and you're familiar with the chain out of New York, first off, their app is very, very well designed from a user experience perspective. It is centered on the fact that people are very enamored with their instructors, and their professional instructors make up to $150 a class in their locations. They have their own soundtracks. All of those soundtracks are shared via their app. You can see the schedule for every one of their instructors in the various markets that they are in, so that if you want to take the class, you can book it at the touch of a finger. They also have a very well integrated e-commerce platform that is launching this fall that will also be part of mobility, so that if Chantel is teaching a class and I love the top she's wearing, it's very easy for me to procure that in a few steps through their app. I think SoulCycle's app, and I would recommend you check out their YouTube commercial on their app, which is very fun, called Oh Appy Day. I put it out today on my Gold's Gym presentation. I mean, it wasn't long ago. Could you imagine a brand like that launching an online promotion of video called Oh Appy Day about their app? I mean, that's how good their app must be, right?
Can't wait to check it out.
Yeah, exactly. You got to try that out. So they are a company and you know what's great about them is they're focused on their core business. You know, mentioning business strategy, right? They've thought through this, and convenience, the ability to buy online, book online, get the information you need from the instructor, interact with the instructor professional. It really, procure stuff the instructor's wearing, all those things very easily. It's really about convenience, about extending that experience to the mobile app and making it really easy for the customer. And they do that very well.
JT was actually speaking about SoulCycle recently, and he mentioned the focus around the instructor, that it's just so huge and that they are almost celebrities, I guess, themselves, and that they're incentivized to build a community of members as part of their instructor role.
Absolutely. 8% of the instructors that enter their training program actually become instructors. And, look, they have a very unique model, but it's something to look at. When you think about how they've integrated technology, they've done it very well in the context of what their business model is. And that's why I think they're having tremendous success.
Bryan, there is good reason why you're one of the most influential people to follow on Twitter. There are some really solid takeaways for our listeners there on mobility, on technology, strategy, plus all of your references on books and key influences for us to check out. Bryan, just thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your time with us today.
Chantel, my best to JT, my best to you. Thank you for all the great work you're doing. And guys and gals, hit me up on Twitter anytime you like. I always respond. And have a great day, Chantel. Appreciate you making time.
Rex Roundtables is a powerful forum in Europe, the US, and Australia for club owners and personal training business owners. In Australia, Justin Tamsett from Active Management runs the Rex Roundtables under the brand Industry Leaders Roundtable. In the show notes for today's episode, you'll find a YouTube link for you to watch and hear more about the roundtables. This 90-second video is a great explanation, so don't forget to check it out in today's show notes. Welcome to our very first listener interview. Now, each month we're going to be hearing from one of you guys. We want to know why you love the show, what are your favorite takeaways have been, and what you want to hear more of. So to kick off our listener interview series, I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. He's a regular listener of the show, and he's the president of MyZone, Emmett Williams. Welcome to the show, Emmett.
Good morning, good afternoon, Chantel.
It is like that, isn't it, when you're on a podcast? It's a bit of good morning, good day, good afternoon.
That's right. Evening for me and morning for you.
That's right. Look, I thought we might kick off today by perhaps you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in the fitness industry.
Yeah, sure. Look, I've been in the industry for about 12 years now. In Australia, I spent most of my time as the owner of CFM, which is a marketing company. We also had an office in the US and in the UK. I have a small chain of gyms in Australia called Voyage Fitness. I think you interviewed MJ 2 or 3 months ago who spoke about that.
Yeah.
And these days I'm the president and co-owner of a wearable tech company called MyZone, and I'm based out of Chicago in the US.
I've got a funny feeling lots of our listeners will know all about MyZone, but we will definitely put a link in the show notes for those of you that want to know more. Now, you're a bit of a fan of podcasts, and I love that you tune into the Fitness Business Podcast while you're out doing your running.
Yep.
What is it about podcasts? What do you like about them?
To be honest, it's the children. I'm going to blame the children. Ever since I had 2 young children and run a business that works in multiple time zones and all that good stuff, I just can't find the time to read books. And I used to be that guy that would go on holiday or vacation and sit by the pool and punch out 3 or 4 books and continually do that throughout the year. And then all of a sudden it ground to a halt. So I had my next door neighbour dare me to run a marathon, and I'd been running these half marathons with him. And I finally accepted the dare and was daunted by the miles that I needed to put in. And then stumbled across podcasts and thought, what a great idea. We can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get the miles in, but also get the education in. So I've been listening to podcasts for probably, only 6 or 7 months now, but I thoroughly enjoy my running because I get to do my education. And I don't know how I stumbled across your podcast, but I did. It would have been through either a social media feed or JT's email drip that he does. And sure enough, I subscribed, and now I feel like I know you really well, Chantel.
Listeners, I was just joking with Emmett earlier. I feel like maybe I should start putting in some motivational cues. I should put my personal trainer hat on and do some motivational cues, because I know that there are quite a few of you that do listen whilst you're working out.
I must admit, sometimes I do have to pause the podcast and go back because my run comes over the top and gives me my pace and my time, which interrupts a point that's being made, which is really frustrating.
Maybe I'll have to find a better way to integrate with that sort of technology. Yeah. What, maybe 3, say, ideas or insights or kind of takeaways that you've gotten from the Fitness Business podcast so far?
Yeah, look, I've listened to most of them, and I must admit, of course, I'm looking through, looking at these podcasts through my own lens. And that is of wearable technology, behaviour change, creating habits. And 3 things really jumped out at me. The first one was Paul Bedford. Mm-hmm. I think he was interviewed maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And he spoke about the association between group exercise and retention.
Yeah.
And I knew there was an association, but I presumed it was because the girls that do group X just like hanging in a tribe, the collective nature of it, the social element of it. But the statistics show us that it's, in fact, the reason retention is associated with it is because they book it in their calendar. They commit to a 6 p.m. class on a Tuesday night, and they do whatever they need to do to get out of work and to make sure that they're there for 6 o'clock. And, that comes down to accountability and routine.
Yeah.
And that resonated with me. I don't really do Group X, but I do participate in a boutique studio in Chicago called Shred 415, which is a lot like Barry's Boot Camp that you guys have spoken about before. It's a treadmill-based class where you split your time between body weights and treadmill work. And I tell you what, when I go on that app and book myself in for a 5:15 a.m. class or a 6:15 p.m. class or whatever it may be, I drop everything and make sure I'm there. So I think the point that I got out of it was making a commitment and making the time and being held accountable to that was so important. Then Bill McBride came on a few weeks after that and essentially said that, hey, look, we're in a commodity business. We're all doing the same thing, and there are a threat of substitutes out there. People can go running, they can go bike riding, they can download the TRX app and work out in their backyard. What we essentially provide, our value proposition, is habit formation, it's accountability, it's motivation. And again, that's in the same sphere as what Paul Bedford was saying. And then last week I was on the way home, it was a Friday night, and I happened to be in the car this time, and on a Friday night there's no one to talk to. So I was actually listening to this podcast, and JT was talking about wearable technology and questioning the value of the data. And again, data can be used to be smarter about what you're doing, but it can also be used for gamification and goal setting, goal attainment. And again, that all comes down to accountability, habit formation, motivation, and all that good stuff. So it was interesting to see the thread come between all of them. As I said, I'm looking at it through my own lens, but they're all saying the same thing, and that is routine, accountability, motivation, habit formation.
Emmett, that is such a great example, and that's what these podcasts are all about. It's about, what's relevant for you as a listener, for your role within the fitness industry, and what you can take away from the experiences of our guests, what they share, and how you can implement it in your own business. So for any of you that missed the shows that Emmett just mentioned, I'll make sure to put a link in this week's show notes so that you can go back and check those out. So, Emmett, what if I were to put you in charge? Who would be your ideal choice of guest for the show? And what's one question that you might ask them?
Look, you know what? Great question. And now that I'm living over here in the States and attending what feels like a conference every 2 or 3 weeks, I have the great fortune of being able to sit down and grab a beer with the founding fathers of the industry, the entrepreneurs who have done really well. And I'm fascinated. I really do see myself as a student of the game. But I look at the industry in 2015 and think that 6 and 7 years ago, we all thought the industry was over-clubbed, meaning there were too many clubs for the population. That was in Australia, that's in the US, in the UK. It just felt like we were all doing the same thing and there were too many clubs for the population, as I said. But then the disruptors entered, and that was Planet Fitness on one side with the high volume, low price clubs, and the boutiques on the other side. And all of a sudden the club count went through the roof. And if you have a look at SoulCycle right now, they're a great example of the boutique model doing extremely well. As of the time of right now, recording this podcast, they've put out what's called their S1, which is their prospectus for their IPO. So they're expected to float very soon. And therefore, we've got the good fortune of going through their numbers. And these studios, these spin studios, generate $4 million of revenue a year, and they're making about $1 million of EBITDA. They've got something like 35 of them, and they think they can grow to 250 of them. And if you said to me 6 years ago that someone would turn around and get a spin studio out of a club, put it in a boutique strip mall scenario and make it really cool and charge $20 or $35 per class and do all those sort of revenue numbers, I wouldn't have believed it. Just as if you turned around maybe 10 years ago and said that Planet Fitness were going to charge $10 and they'd get themselves to 1,000 clubs before listing and promising everyone that they'd grow to 4,000 clubs, again, I wouldn't have believed you. So they're two great examples of disruptive models. They've done well. They're both successful. So I'd love to get into the mind of the founders of those type of brands and ask them, was that luck? Was it passion for that particular model, i.e. the girls behind SoulCycle? Was it just because they thought they'd like it themselves and they'd see how it went? Or was it analytical? Did they analyse the market and did they see a vein that they could hit that would produce oil? Really sort of fascinated to see how they got there.
They are awesome suggestions, and I would say that there'd be quite a few of our listeners who would definitely agree with you and who would also love to hear just how those businesses were born and their journey to what they've become today. So I accept the challenge. So stay tuned for that one, listeners. I will let you know how we go with that. Thank you so much for your time today, Emmett, and thanks for being our very first listener interview.
Not a problem. Thank you.
It's time for the Fitness Business Podcast Wrap.
Hey guys, here are a few of the technology tips from my chat with Bryan O'Rourke. But most importantly, jump over onto the Fitness Business Podcast website because that's where I've put all of the references that he mentioned. So that's like who to follow, what to read, that sort of stuff. Now, Bryan reminded us to stay up to date with technology via following key influencers on social media. And all of those people he mentioned are on the show notes. Now, on Twitter, set aside time each week to identify the things that are most relevant to you, like the brands, the technology, the leaders, and segment them into lists for easier viewing. Fitness business owners need to provide some type of mobile experience that has the ability to engage and provide functionality to your members or to your prospective members. Remember the example that he gave about SoulCycle. And last but not least, you need a business strategy and mapping of your customer journey. So with any technology applications, you're thinking through how you want it to work for your members. I also, before we head off today, want to say a very special thank you to Emmett Williams, our very first listener interview. Really, really great insights from Emmett there about what he enjoyed about the show and plus that little challenge of a future podcast guest thrown in there. So I'm going to see how I go with that one. Now, before I say goodbye for today, you know the rules. Don't forget to rate the Fitness Business Podcast on iTunes. Head over to iTunes and search for the Fitness Business Podcast under the title Ratings and Reviews. Click there and give us a star rating. Remember, we want to keep delivering fantastic information, free information to you guys. All we ask in return is that you head on over and rate the show. Now, if you've got any suggestions, comments, feedback, if you want to be our very next listener interview, then hit me up. Send me an email at chantal@activemgmt.com.au. Or, of course, if you've got a question at any time about owning or managing a fitness business, send it on through to me. Plus, don't forget, you can find all of our previous episodes and our show notes and all of those important links from today's show at the website, which is just fitnessbusinesspodcast.com. Until next week, what you leave behind is not what's engraved in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others.
You have been listening to the world's #1 podcast called the Fitness Business Podcast, brought to you by Active Management. We are dedicated to helping your fitness business #grow in 2015. Check out www.activemgmt.com.au for resources, tools, and more to help you. And by far, the best value for you is to become a member. So join today at www.activemgmt.com.au.